Welcome to our poster session presentation. My name is Stephanie Shutt, and with me today in support of technology is Elizabeth Hecox. We are both school climate specialists in the Office of School Climate and Student Discipline at the Oklahoma City Public Schools District. Just a little background about who we are and what we do. Currently, there are 10 school climate specialists. And our district, we are serving 60 elementary, middle, and high schools. During this session today, we are really excited to share with you and about our journey and how we learned to begin our process of implementing PBIS Tier 1. And in particular, one of the tools that we use to guide our work, and that is of the rubrics. So a little bit of history. Like many districts across the United States, PBIS implementation was a district-driven requirement or mandate as a result of an Office of Civil Rights complaint in 2014-15 school year. So at that time, our district really lacked a lot of basic understanding of the framework. We also really didn't have a firm commitment from the implementation with a strategic plan from the district level. And there was currently pretty ineffective district and site communication about framework implementation. We also lacked adequate department personnel, which made for a very high specialist to site ratio. I think at that time it was probably about each specialist had between 20 and 25 sites to support. And also there was really no district or department trainings regarding this at high levels. And we didn't even have a financial budget money dedicated to this in terms other than a few salaries. So we, at that point, after a couple of us were hired, we know that we wanted to create some kind of a simple data collection tool that would allow two things. One, to really help our sites understand, have a deeper understanding of the systems, and then also to be able to report on their status of that implementation. So when we talk about the development of the rubric itself, a couple of things. We had a lot of barriers, and we really thought it would be most salient to build capacity from kind of a grassroots mindset. Below there, you see a snapshot of one of the rubrics. We have 5 rubrics. This happens to be the school-wide expectations rubric. And one of the things we really thought would be helpful to people who were relatively new to all of this, even though PBIS had been around for a few years in 2014 and 15, we knew that this was new for the people that we were working with. So first of all, we wanted to make sure that we were aligning the rubric to meet PBIS standards. So we used a variety of PBIS assessments to use that common language. We used the SAS, we used portions from the TIC, and we also have some pieces from the TFI on there that are representative of those different components of the systems. So the next thing we wanted to do was to use something that our staff and our leaders were at least becoming more familiar with at the same time. And that was utilizing the Marzano implementation descriptors. So you see at the very top, not using, beginning, developing, applying, and innovating. Those were now becoming the terms that our teachers were becoming familiar with as they began to work with the evaluation tool from Marzano. So we thought that might help understand those different gradations of how we move in time and how we get better as we keep adding skills. And the next thing you can see is that on the left-hand side, in the middle, one of the criteria in this particular rubric is expectations communication. we wanted to provide scaffolded instruction for each of these systems. As an example of incremental outcome language on this rubric, you can look at the category as we move across. As you can see in expectation communications, when our sites are at a beginning level, communicate 3 to 5 school-wide expectations to staff. Then as we move forward, we say that we're going to do the same thing. We're going to communicate expectations to staff and students. And when we get to application or the applying level, we are going to have expectations communicated to staff, students, and family and community. So the reasoning behind that, really a couple of things. It gives sites some small wins that once, the development of the expectations has happened, and we get credit to not mark a box that now you've communicated them to the staff and you've solicited their feedback. And now you're letting the students know. And so it became kind of a way for us to get familiar with that and break it down into smaller pieces so that staff and the site leaders could really understand what that system, what it all entailed. Other rubrics that we have also use a very similar incremental language as well. And in addition to the tier 1 systems of expectations, we have the team, acknowledgements, discipline, and data. And the tier 1 team was a big focus for us. In fact, in the placement of the rubrics, we place it at the beginning. This would allow for our teams to really begin to operate efficiently and effectively in collaboration with our office. It became a great communication tool for us, and that it would help them differentiate what their roles and responsibilities were compared to that of a tier 2 and tier 3 team. So we wanted to be really very clear about the tier 1 team and the importance of the team and how it is foundational really for everything. So moving to how we use the rubric, a couple of things, as you can see. We recognize that, there is a danger when you isolate, these different systems in these 5 different places, that you don't really get a cohesive and integrated and comprehensive system. So that became our role as specialists, is really to help coach that once we know if we are in developing in this one particular rubric, we may want to come in at the developing stage right next to it so that that particular system becomes much more cohesive. So using that as an integration of systems was helpful for us as the coaches. We use it in that manner. The other way, using this as most rubrics are, as this kind of summative tool. When we first developed the rubrics, it was primarily an end of the year in May with the teams assessing where are we at, what did we accomplish at that point. So we pretty much used it to celebrate growth. We also used it to compare from previous years where schools happened to land. And then we also know that summatively it was a great place for sites to put on their artifacts right on there. We could link artifacts right in those squares to show, where they were with those, and could even change those from year to year as they increase their systems. So we also use the tool now formatively, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but that was not the original rendition of the rubric use. And as I mentioned, the artifact organizer really helps have this visual presentation that when one of the criteria in each of those boxes is completed, we color code it to show the growth. And then you can see, as they are linked, the different artifacts that show that we have communicated to students, or we have developed lesson plans, and we can link those lesson plans and those schedules right on there. So the other piece is moving towards what we would say, oops, after using what we have learned from our lessons. So it has provided us really more opportunities to engage in discussions with site leaders, as well as our department. We never really thought that this could be something that would be as helpful as it has been. One of the other things that has happened is the collaborative discussions with new specialists. As in any large urban district, we do have a lot of mobility, not only with our students, but with our staff. And our office was no different in that regard. So the rubrics really did provide that foundation for us to communicate with each other. As you notice in the bottom right-hand corner of our poster, the rubric data chart provides our department data on the implementation status at a glance for all of our sites. So it's really important for us that we can see that if I look at acknowledgements in the middle and it's got the blue color noting that currently many of our buildings do not have those reinforcement systems built in. And so that's really great data for us to guide our professional learning direction as a district, which we now have. It also provides discussion points for the team collaboration on coaching practices. When one school is in that developing or in that applying, learning about how they are moving those sites to move further into that particular system. So it's really helped with our coaching as well with our new and existing specialists. I think we've also learned that we had needed to make some minor adjustments along the way. For example, in our original rubric, we did not have a not using column. And we soon learned that just putting people in the beginning maybe gives them an unrealistic sense that they are somehow implementing something when in fact they really aren't. So we added that column. We also added the weighting. You can see behind beginning there is a 1 and developing is a 2. And so what we can do is we can mathematically now ascribe scoring value so that the specialists are much more consistent in our scoring, that we have. Not only do we have the artifacts to show those in each areas, now we know that if you are at a 0.25 or you're at 2.8, we know exactly that you're mostly in developing. So taking a look at that whole picture, that's one rubric, but what would be the overall score that we would say you are at in expectations? So the weighting scoring system came much later, but has been a really good growth lessons learned from the beginning. I think the other piece is, I think I mentioned earlier, that using this more formatively, setting up times, at benchmark times at the end of October, before we get into second semester, and then of course using it at the very end of the year to see where teams are at. And as our team has grown from 5 to 10 people, we've come to the ideas that more people have more ideas, and so because of that, we've had minor wording adjustments just for clarity's sake, to have that common language that we can use with all of our sites. So as I close this poster session, on behalf of Elizabeth Hecox and myself, Stephanie Shutt, and our entire Office of School Climate, we would like to thank you for your interest in the Oklahoma City Public Schools Tier 1 PBIS implementation rubrics. If you are interested in hearing more about our journey, rubric copies will be made available during this poster session. And we do look forward to engaging in future discussions and possibly learning some lessons learned from your sites that would enhance our practice as well. So till we see you soon, have a great rest of the conference.